Welcome to the Q.A.C. Team Podcast, your quality assurance consulting team. Quality is our highest priority for your business with one goal, one direction, success. And now here's your host, Charles Luttrell. Good afternoon, Scott. Welcome back to our third edition of the Roundtable discussions. How are you, sir?
Hey, Chuck. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, man, I'm so glad you come back for another, man. This is great. I love this series.
Yeah, it's a great series.
Yeah. So as we talked about last week in our closing, we wanted to talk about processes and procedures this week. And I have a couple of topics here I'd like to go over. I'll run them by you. So number one, we have greeting and seating customers, like hostess, taking orders, the server,
Okay.
food preparation and presentation, kitchen,
Okay.
customer interaction and feedback, and then billing and payment. What do you think about those? Pretty good topics?
Yeah, I think we could do all five.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
greeting and seating customers with the hostess. So obviously when customers arrive, the restaurant staff should, promptly greet the guests, smile, inquire about seating preferences, and efficiently seat them. And you would hope that the areas are clean and prepared from the bussers. Give us a little details about the process and procedures about the greeting and seating of customers from the hostess, from your side.
It's the first interaction that you're going to have with the public, with the guests. So that's, it's hypercritical that you understand greeting people as professional as possible. So we're professional men and women that serve professional men and women. So we have to make sure that we honor and fulfill that role. Uh, and it's not a that's not a passe, position in a restaurant by any means. I think a good host or hostess would, obviously introduce themselves, ask the time of the reservation, um, ask if they've been here before, and if they have, start the conversation there. At that point, that would be within the first 60 seconds of the guest walking in.
Mm-hmm. I had a pretty interesting experience one time not too long ago from a restaurant. So I walked in. There wasn't a host there at the stand yet, so I'm standing there waiting. And the young female walks up, and she's like, "Do you have a reservation?" I say, "No." And she's like, "Well, looks like it's going to be about 45 minutes to an hour." I'm like, "Okay, well, I guess I'll just come back." She's like, "Well, I can take your name and number and call you when we're about ready." I'm like, "All right." So I gave her my name and number, and I walked outside to get my car. As I start to drive away, she calls me. I mean, it was not even 5 minutes. "Hey, we got a table ready for you."
Mm. So where was the information coming from? So that would be my question.
Communication breakdown, right? So, it was a smaller restaurant, not very huge. So, from my view, when I first walked in, it wasn't that large of a restaurant. So, clearly this person should have known, you know, their schedule of guests or table turning, you know, how fast they turn and seat, and to give inaccurate information like that, it's kind of crazy, right?
No,
Thoughts?
I mean, it would have been. I would say that if she would have just paused for another 60 seconds, she would have she probably, or he, whomever, whichever gender was there, the host would have, seen how many tables were actually available. Um, I think it's highly unlikely that the phone rang, 2 seconds after that happened, but, um, slowing the process down. A lot of veterans, they always talk about slowing things down, or things slow down the better that you get at something.
Uh-huh.
So I would say that would be either someone that was nervous,
Mm-hmm.
someone that maybe wasn't, fully prepared for the first greeting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're nervous, she's going to rely on that training that she's had. So if the blanket statement was, don't take walk-ins until you're sure, or something to that effect,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I would say probably happened. So if let's say that was a 3 to 5 year old employee, that had been doing that job for 3 to 5 years, I would say that's probably the case. That person got nervous and then relied on the training that she's received and
Mm-hmm.
just said what she was supposed to say. I think that the higher expertise employee would have taken the extra 60 seconds, looked over the seating chart, said something to the effect of, um, I can get back to you in a few moments and let you know how long the wait is going to be. It's something like that.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, looking at it, I could see the entire restaurant from where I was standing at the host stand. So it wasn't that she couldn't look and see that there was seating available. Now, maybe the other tables were reserved. There could have been somebody called in for reservations. I mean, coming from my side as the customer standing at the host stand, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of I see 4 tables open. Why'd you tell me it's going to be, you know, 45 minutes to an hour?
Because that's what she was supposed to do. She's in charge of the pacing of the restaurant. So if
Uh-huh.
do you remember what time it was?
Yeah, it was
I mean,
early evening.
regardless, it doesn't really.
Right. It was
So
early
it
evening,
was
around 4
probably the
o'clock.
first turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's the first turn, and she knows how many people are coming in. She knows what time they're coming in. She knows the order of the seating arrangement that has to be implemented, and it has to be done properly because any good restaurant is going to have a ton of information. So to give you an example, because you walked in, you saw, all these open tables, you're like, why can't I just sit down? And that hostess might have 75 people that she's about to seat in the next 60 minutes. They're
Right.
just not there yet.
They're just not
And
there
she
yet.
might have
Right.
75 people that have been there or going there for years, even if they haven't been going there for years, but like
Right.
there's an enormous amount of information that employee has that is just not seen. So I would say that most people would have the same reaction, like, why can't I just sit there? Well,
Right.
because I'm doing my job, sir. That's
Right.
why.
Right. Right. And from my standpoint, my thinking is this wasn't that long ago, so this employee may not have been there that long, and they may not have understood the proper, way to look over the chart, the seating chart, and learn table turning. And they might not have all that data, so they're probably going off of, well, I'm afraid to tell this guy to put him here, and then somebody is reserved, and then I have to move somebody, so then it gets all weird, right? So that's my thinking, was that they just weren't there long enough to understand how to really seat people, you know?
I I would have to argue against that because I don't know the scenario. But if the scenario is that if she was a um, has less tenure in
Right.
that position, she
Mm-hmm.
still used the failsafe of I need more time to solve this problem, and that's what
Ah,
she
right.
did,
Yeah. And if you're unsure, reach out to the manager, right, to get
which
some
is probably
clarity.
what she did.
Yeah,
Right.
right, right. Very interesting. Very interesting. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about from the server side. So the guest has been seated, and let's get into the taking orders. You know, so let's talk about accurately taking orders, paying attention to special requests, and I think something that comes up a lot now is the dietary restrictions, right? So there's a lot of things of allergies and stuff that the kitchen needs to know from taking orders, correct?
That's correct. Which the hostess also needs to know. Because if
Yes.
they're right. So again, that's one more element that I think that the host should know, or the hostess, that position should know, the server
Hmm.
should know, the chef should know, the manager should know. They everyone all the way across the board should know that if there is a gluten allergy at seat 4 on table 11, then that's what should be known. You
Hmm.
know, so without having proper pre-shifts and post shifts talking about the next night, that those are just super important to have a successful operation.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So go ahead and go back. I didn't mean to divert too far, over, but
No, that's
um
okay. That's perfect. I just had a statement about, talking about um, accurate orders, because what frustrates me a lot, if there's more than two people in my party, sometimes they mix up who gets what drink, and then the food comes out and we have to like shuffle it around. What process and procedure should be in place so that doesn't happen? Is there something that during the training that happens so you don't look like a restaurant that doesn't know what they're doing when a server brings the food out and it's not correct for the right person?
Yeah, we don't take that. I don't take that. My team does that. We don't take that for
Yeah.
granted at all. Like that's unacceptable
Yeah.
for this level. Um, it's not something that, like, auctioning off food never
Mhm.
happens.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever saying, who got the scallops. Like, if I like I'm not like we don't do that. So
So what
um
process or procedures in place is at training, right? So how is that taught in training? So to avoid that, there's like a little drawing on their pad that says, "All right, here's a square table, and this person gets this and that." How is it? How is it? How's that done?
okay, so we have seating charts, we have seating arrangements, we have names, we have times, we have favorites, we favorite items always to be ordered. We had a couple that came in every Wednesday, 7 o'clock, same order every single time.
Hmm.
Espresso at the end of the night, with a twist. Uh, Never changed. Never changed. The menu, the menu changed every time that those people came in, but we were hyper diligent about creating an experience that they could rely on.
Hmm.
And in order to do that, you have to have maps, graphs, drawings, time, clocks around that the guest cannot see. Um, I would have my phone out, using the stopwatch feature of the phone. Um, I would be texting the front of the house during service in order to make sure that this guest has arrived or has not arrived.
Hmm.
Um, and that was only because now there are a lot of point of sale systems, POS systems, that allow all of that type of communication to happen without actually using your phone, which I would prefer. But since
Hmm.
I had 36 seats, so, like, I'm only seating 14 tables at a time.
Hmm.
That's not, I wouldn't say that that's a crushing amount of information that needs to be passed.
Hmm.
Um, but your lead server, will batch all of that information. Your dining room manager will even further batch that information. Um, you know, I I had the information. I was the information pivot point.
Hmm.
So for the entire operation, depending on no matter where I was in the restaurant, but on a standard night, if I'm on the pass, I'm the pivot point for all of the information. So all the information come to me while I'm expediting, and then all of that information then would be regurgitated and translated into kitchen,
Hmm.
from dining room language to kitchen language, because you try to get them as close as you can. Like, you want everybody to say the same words, but sometimes inflection is different, sometimes accents are different, sometimes there's just it's a human element.
Right.
So everybody's going to translate it a little bit differently, but that's exactly what you want. You want it to be a little bit different to no different. You don't, no difference in language is perfect. A little bit different is heading towards something that's very good.
Hmm.
Um, so let's use the glue analogy. Position 4 on table 11. My pasta cook would know that. My saucier would know that. My sous chef would know that. My lead cook would know that. My dishwasher would know that.
Hmm.
And why would I'm absolutely adamant about getting as much information to every position as that I can. And the reason for that is because, one, I want everyone to start paying attention to the language that's being used,
Hmm.
and two, people are going to remember that.
Yeah.
If I say, to the dishwasher, I have a gluten allergy, that means that can't go anywhere near anything that's, the gluten allergy is a very deep allergy. But let's just use, for basic example, anything that's a bread product or flour product. Okay, so that means that the pasta cook cannot interact with the plating of that particular table.
Uh-huh.
Like you can't. I need a new pan. I need fresh pans. We're gonna wash everything, especially if it's celiac. I mean, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And it was not uncommon for me to I will shut the whole restaurant down for a celiac. You
Yeah.
know, scrub everything down. We switched everything out, put gloves on or took the gloves off, to make sure that there was no cross contamination.
Uh-huh.
Um, I had a guest come in a few times with her own pan, and she asked me to use that pan only when she came in. And it was wrapped. He like wrapped in plastic,
Like
and
a
we did
yeah,
it.
plastic, and that's very cool.
Yeah,
So she brought that every time she came in. So here's my pan, cook it in here,
yeah.
and then
She brought it once and then left it at the restaurant.
gotcha. And so
And
you can
then
use this one every time.
right now, I don't want to say I could do that 50 times, but I could do it
Right.
once.
That was
You know,
that was my next statement. Was like, what if 25 customers did that? I think that would be a little tough, but I
If
get it.
I'll tell you what I would do. If I had 25 customers, or guests that were doing that, I would reach out to my investors and be like, listen, I have a really high demand for this. Can we talk about it?
Right.
Like that. That's what I would do.
Yeah, and that's just pretty cool because what you're talking about now just kind of segues right into the next topic of food preparation and presentation. I thought that was pretty slick, and I was waiting for me to come in and step in with this phrase, because that's pretty cool. Because I think food preparation and presentation that's a loaded topic, man. Because there's so much, as you talked about, with hygiene and certain allergies and there's so much that goes into this, and plating, right? Presentation can be so much, right?
The aesthetic has to be there.
Yeah.
It has to be. It's not. That's not. Listen, flavor comes first. Like I if you look at a sandwich, like a pretty sandwich, you have all of these things that are cut to nice shapes. But if it's under seasoned, what do you care? Like it's not good. That's not a
Hmm.
good thing. So
Right.
there's a there's a there's a there's a ton of like what I would call gray area. There's all these variables that are involved when it comes to the aesthetic of food for me. It's not a simple thing.
Hmm.
Um, I want to touch as many receptors on in the mouth that I can all at once without going over. Like
Yeah.
you don't want to be contrived, but you also want to make sure you know like think of like the RPM needle in your car. If you're pushing that and you're up to four maybe five elements of color, texture, salt, sweet, bitter, sour, and all of these things are just like ramming towards the goal of being delicious. If you go over, it's no good. You're going to blow your motor. Like it's not a good scenario for the guest because the
Right.
guest is going to be overloaded the same way that
Yeah.
your engine is. So you want to make sure that you have like you need a rev limiter if you're heavy footed. Like
Yeah.
you have to have that you have to have that that bump stop there to make sure that you're not going to take it too far.
That's a pretty cool analogy. I like that. You comparing the food taste to the car, RPMs. That's pretty good, man. I like that.
You got to fire in all cylinders. You
Yeah.
can't you can't have four cylinders and only have three working.
And
That
here's the
doesn't
yeah,
work
and here's
either.
what's cool about that. If you think about it, right? If you look at McDonald's, right, they can have this beautiful looking cheeseburger on the commercials, on TV, on the menu boards, right? But when you go there, does it ever look like that?
No.
Never. But we still eat it, right? We still get it, and it due
Well, somebody
mainly due
does.
to the price, right? I get it, due to the price. But if you go to a restaurant and that piece of steak comes out and it doesn't look like some kind of steak that's really edible, we freak out.
Mhm.
You know, isn't that crazy? It's like you eat
Well,
that cheeseburger.
there's an
That's
that's an inherent expectation.
yeah.
People have an expectation when you go to a restaurant. People want to go eat things that they cannot do.
Hmm.
That they cannot find. that they cannot prepare themselves for whatever reason. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, I've met maybe 10,000 or heard of 10,000 backyard, masterpiece guys because they put, raised barbecue sauce on their chicken, and all of a sudden these are pit masters. So it's not really the case, but
Right.
like, but there is an underlying, and I don't think that that should leave. I don't think that expectation should go anywhere. I
Hmm.
think the expectation, I think the knowledge should catch the expectation.
Yeah.
Like, I want the most educated diners. I don't want the least.
Right. I'm with
And
you.
it's just better. It's better overall.
Yeah.
When you go out to the table and you're talking to the table, and they were like, I've had conversations with people who were financial experts, and they read about food. That I don't think that they didn't come in championing the fact that they were, food experts,
Uh huh.
but they came in with knowledge, and I could actually have a conversation with that person.
Hmm.
I'm sitting next to that person going, you know what, that's respectable to me.
Right.
Trying to learn another trade, or at least the knowledge of the trade, any stream of information is valuable. So, that's the same thing as me sitting down, trying to talk about ROI, in any other, lending or investment, portfolio. And that's not something that I take lightly either. So it's, it just improves the experience all around, in my
Hmm.
opinion.
Right.
So simply because, I may have been the first fine dining experience for some people, um, and I'm grateful for that. I was, I still feel, pretty excited that, oh, you've never done this before. That's how that came out. It's almost childlike, you know.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, oh wow, you've never done this, and now that person will leave with everything that I ever had in my restaurant.
Right.
Like that. If it was a six-course menu, well, it's probably 12 now, because we're gonna take that 12, we're gonna modify it a little bit, because I want you to have more things.
Right.
Like, if you've never had scallop crudo and you're afraid to eat raw things, well, I'm the guy that you should probably rely on for
Mm,
that. You know,
absolutely. The guy that knows,
so
the guy that cooks it, the
you
guy
know,
that's done it over and
am I
over.
cook like, and if I turn to my kitchen and say we have a first time guest, that's never had a tasting menu before, that I if I'm looking at my Suze, or my line, going, what are we doing? Like, that's what I want. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Like,
And you know
I
what?
want that same type of, excitement, enthusiasm. Say,
Right.
this is, chef, these are my three dishes tonight, or these are my four dishes tonight, whatever it is.
Right. And talking about first time guests, that I think that's a lost art. You don't hear that a lot anymore. When I go to restaurants, and I'm talking, upper mid, not, you know, your smaller restaurants, the ones that really ask you, is this your first time here? You don't hear that much anymore. And, you know, to me, that's kind of a lost art, because if I've never been there for, I would love to hear what I'm going to experience, right? Well, here's what we offer, here's who we are. I'm big on that whole experience part, of tell me about your dishes, right? And what you're offering. I think that would be a great thing to bring back. Your thoughts?
I think that that's two parts. There's two
Mm-hmm.
parts to that. One, we try to make it as close to the first time, or as reliable as the first time feeling can be, for repeat guests.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can't serve you bread for the first time twice, but I can greet you at the door, and give you the hospitality level like I haven't seen you in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, hey, how are you, Mr. Smith? Like, it's great to see you again. Those types of things, that goes a long way. That's not a
Yes.
first time, guest, but it still will emulate that same type of human response.
Mm-hmm.
Recognition goes a long way.
Right.
So if you recognize that there's an opportunity, as I'm a employee of the hospitality industry. I always will be. no matter how big the name actually gets, I'll still be, this is what I do. So this is where I'll be, you know? And,
Right.
um, so, you know, what I'm thinking in terms of those two parts is simply because I could serve you bread once and have it be, you know, a really great experience. I'm trying to replicate that as many times as I can, not just in that one visit, but every single time that you come back.
Right. And enough, you know, did that wow factor enough to have me come back, even though it's simply bread, but the way it was handled, the way they said, "Oh, this is my first time. We're gonna wow you," and have that experience time and time again when you come back. Right.
There ha
That's what we're
there ha
looking for from both sides. Right.
From me, there was always a touch. You know, there was always like if it was chocolate truffles, it was two flavors of chocolate. It wasn't. It was one. You know, one chocolate truffle maybe it was coconut or raspberry or whatever.
Mhm.
Like there's always going to be a surprise element.
Right.
But to go
That's very
back to
cool.
the second part of the first time guest, like that's your opportunity to make sure that you know it becomes a repeat guest.
Hmm.
You know, um, it, there are two very important priorities of getting first time diners to come in the door, which is a art within itself, and then keeping them
Uh huh.
is a
Keep it.
different art within
Right.
itself, you know, and you need to do both.
Hmm.
Like if it's a first time person, like you have to knock that out of the park. And I
Right.
think that the reason why you don't see that, to kind of touch on what you said, you don't see that that much just because I think the industry is getting better, and that's because the tech is getting better. The technology is getting better. So it's
Yeah.
a lot easier to keep track
Right.
of your guests. You know, we're not back there with number two pencils anymore.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
so
And it's cool that you mentioned that because segueing into, one of next to the last topic here, customer interaction and feedback. You know, you hit it right. So I went to a restaurant today, took my oldest daughter to a restaurant today, and we love the food. The food is great, but there are servers that we tend to hope aren't there when we go because it's just not. We know we're not going to get good service, you know, and just happened to be that server who we did not want was our server. Um, what are your thoughts on how should a customer approach that if you feel that your server multiple times has not been what you expect from a restaurant?
um, I deal with very discerning guests,
Hmm.
and I deal with very good intended people. You know, people with good intentions, like, who want to
Hmm.
do a good job. And sometimes that line is perpendicular, and it's not always good. Um, that could be a real challenge when when you have to tell your ace that they're not getting table 11. It's not, it doesn't always go well. You know, so
I can see
um,
that, right?
you know, and it doesn't go well, and that's because that's my own thing. Like
Uh-huh.
that's part of me. I have to go with the guest, and I have to back up this, the service station, or I'm sorry, the service team.
Uh-huh.
um because you have to be, as a brand or as a human, you have to be loyal to the people that are out there doing the work for you.
Yeah.
Like you have to, there has to be, it has to be reciprocated. Like you can't just leave them out. You can't dog them.
Right.
Like that's not okay. So,
Yeah.
I had guests that reached out to me and requested another server.
Right. And that's
I
what
had to make a call, and
yeah.
from my, what I can do is, the guest is going to win on that. And I think that if any server were to look at that and say, okay, so maybe I shouldn't get upset about this, I shouldn't take offense to this, because there's 13 other tables, or there's other things out there that can still carry the weight.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect their dollars in a negative way.
Hmm.
Um, sometimes that's just the breaks. Sometimes it's not as 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 flow, as flowing as you want it to be. It's not as you know you got to make a call, so you make a call.
And that is, where QAC team comes in. So you utilize something that, like our RMS program, and that can help with that, right? Because you have a customer now who is coming into your restaurant. They love your food, but the service isn't really that great. So now you have a chance to coach and mentor that server to say, look, we had some feedback from a customer. Here it is. We talk about it. And then we try to make that server better so we don't have to, make that server look, um, or make them feel a certain way because this customer wasn't getting that. They weren't getting that table. What do you think?
I mean, you're trying to please two separate entities.
Mm-hmm.
Like
That's the tough part. That's a balance.
they're
Yeah.
they're parallel lines that
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't necessarily cross. And I think any good manager will be able to do both.
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I'm happy to make the adjustment. And then you just turn to your lead and be like, listen, you're still the lead, or you're whomever, I'm just using the lead as the
Yeah.
example because,
Sure. Sure.
these are more senior people that are on the floor. So,
Mhm.
you know, um, I have more communication with the senior level people in the company than I do with the lower level people. Um, in different ways.
Mhm.
It's not it's seniority is not necessarily the grading system.
Right.
Um, you know, the new dishwasher that's been there for 4 weeks still has to have one-on-one, still has to, he's still going to be managed within the team. Sometimes that should not be me.
Right.
That should not be me. He's gonna
Mhm.
that dishwasher's probably going to be more comfortable talking to someone else than he is to me, and I want to make sure that that person stays comfortable. So if
Mhm.
I have to step out of that equation, that's fairly easy for me to do. That's not a hard
Right.
adjustment.
Right. Yeah. I think that it says a lot. If you got a report, from an analyst that came in and reviewed your restaurant, you have all the touch points of everything that happened, factual, and you share it with your staff. That it goes a long way to show everybody. Look, this is what happened. Here's the good, the bad, the ugly, and cover all the bases with all your employees, all your staff, and then particularly with that server in question to say, look, this is what happened, it's how it is, and you know how to handle that going forward, right?
I would let them chew on it.
Mm-hmm.
I would present the information if this was a task or if this was, something that I would do on a daily basis. I would let them chew on it.
Yeah.
You know, if we got good reviews, I sent them. I congratulated them. If we got bad reviews, we talked about it.
Right.
I didn't take every single review. I don't take that. I don't take it seriously, and I don't take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's situational for me. Um, some people took shots for unknown reasons, and some people were like, "This was the best thing I've ever ate in my life."
Right.
And you have to kind of take that and mix them together, and then what do you get? Like, what's the average on that?
Right.
So, um, we have
And then
five-star
taking
reviews.
that.
We have
Yeah.
we have 5-star reviews on days we weren't even open,
Right.
and we
Take.
had we had 0-star reviews on days that we weren't even open.
Right.
So,
And taking
so
that, right, taking that information, taking it from something like, QAC team to where you're getting that factual data because this person was here because they hired this person to come in to give you that data. So there is no, it takes out that, ambiguity of, well, they weren't really there or they were, but we don't really know if they're telling the truth or not because, this person is hired to do this, so you're getting that great data.
and if it comes from if it comes from a good source, like I said, like I hire people knowing who they are,
Yeah.
so I'm going to sit down with the people that I have, and I'm going to say, listen, Mr. Smith, his complaint was, the pasta was undercooked.
Uh-huh.
Was it? And I'm going to turn to, was it undercooked?
Right.
Like and I expect it to not be a silent room. Like I expect the
Somebody
answer.
better say something, right?
You know, I would be much more. I would lean further towards the solution of putting the information out there, and being accountable. Now, being accountable is not just filling the void of silence.
Uh-huh.
Being accountable is saying that pasta was overcooked. Okay, is it a
Huh.
or you think that what? So what would you do? Ask them. You know,
Give them the opportunity to, right.
it'll force them to create this scenario, and the what if scenario. What am I going to do if this happens?
Right.
All right, so taking accountability from the staff, meaning
Mhm.
what does taking accountability actually mean to me? It's it's not just filling the void of silence at the meeting.
Right.
It's actually taking action, being proactive to go make the adjustment. It might just
Uh-huh.
be, hey, tell Timmy to cook it for 35 seconds longer, or make
Right.
sure you check it. Like, how did anybody check that? Like, who
Right.
checked it? How did it get out? How many
Uh-huh.
hands did that pass before somebody? Because obviously nobody picked up on it. So how many people did it pass in order to make sure that that was correct?
Right. And again, it gets back to what we're talking about today is the processes and procedures and how we're handling those things. So if the customer says this pasta was way overcooked or undercooked, like you said, how did it get there? So we have to go back and see. Let's run back what we did to fail this dish.
That procedure has to be done.
Yeah, that's
It
very
has to be
important.
done.
Yep. And it's pretty cool because now that segues into our last point of touch here is billing and payment. So that touches a lot of different things. So when I hear about billing and payment, you know, again, we got a bad dish, right? We have a customer who doesn't want to pay. We got to make sure that the bill is accurate. Did the server write up the order correct? So give us a little bit of insights on this topic of billing and payment from your side.
I think that there's going to be so much gray area in that question, but
How did I know you were going to say that?
I got
Put it out of my mouth.
I'll see if I can cut it into smaller pieces. All right.
I love it. That's great.
One, I think the restaurant industry is heading towards prepay. I think that we should be a prepay.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, we pay at the end, where a lot of other industries, you either pay up front, you pay half. You know, I don't see how we're any different than any other trade.
Yeah.
Um, and there's because then there's the argument: is this a trade? Is it a craft? Is it an art? What is it exactly? And it depends on what level you want to be at.
Right.
It's like you want high recognition, high prestige. You want to be in a high profile environment. You got to understand that you're going to be in high stress, high chaos. Like your stress management and problem solving skills have to be immaculate. Like you
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to take adjustments. You have to be able to understand that every day is going to be exactly different, and it's not going that part of the industry is not going to change.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the last time I had 2 days back to back that looked exactly the same. I don't
Mm-hmm.
even know if I ever have. So every single day is exactly different. And that's just the element of the industry as it is
Mm-hmm.
right now. Now, going to prepay, I don't I don't see I'm not so sure that it's more of a tradition to pay at the end versus that's just how it was always been done. I know a lot about the industry, and I do research a little bit of history involved in this, but not adjusting in in not adjusting to going to a prepay could absolutely continue to handicap the industry financially.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody wants to make more money. I also think that somehow the reputation of the industry it's always been the stepchild.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been the $10 an hour gig, and that I'll do this and I'll do that, and maybe if I work hard, I'll make it, and you will. I want to be one of the guys on the other end of the phone saying, pay him what he's worth. Like, pay him 2023 money. Don't pay him 1946 money.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's make sure that we understand where we are, because $12 then and $12 now is super different. Like,
Yeah.
like take like because I this isn't about profitability. This is about retention. This is about treating people with dignity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't walk into your company and think that you can pay everyone $1 million a year. Like, that's not going to happen.
Right.
But
So
but I
what
am
if?
saying,
So let's touch
give them the
on
opportunity to make money.
right. Let's touch that a little bit because I think that touches onto the point I'm making here. Let's say customer has a bad experience, right? Well, that's not really a bad experience. Customer has a not so great experience. The pasta was undercooked,
Okay.
and they noted the server about it and said, I really wasn't happy with this dish. At what point does the server take control of that situation to say, do they reach out to the manager and say that this dish, they don't want to pay for this, they shouldn't pay for it, who pays for it? Give us a little insight on if a customer is unhappy with their dish, what does that look like from the restaurant's process and procedure side?
Well, let's preface that with saying we work 100 hours a week to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So let's not leave that part out.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I'm speaking about, I didn't go off the rail so much. It's more like the edge of the rail that I'm talking about. So,
Mm-hmm.
in order to be financially sound, you have to get paid, right? So
Yeah.
we
Right.
work really hard to make sure that we don't make the mistakes. So being preemptive and following these processes and procedures to be as preemptive as you can be.
Right.
You know, I had cooks and chefs make gluten-free things, not even having a gluten-free guest on,
Huh.
because you're gonna need the extra, you know, the the extra arrow in the quip. Like, you're gonna need that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're gonna need something at some point where something's gonna happen. Sally's gonna drop a dish, and then all of a sudden you have 15 minutes that you have to fill, and your guest is sitting there hungry. Let's say the pasta dish came back. Now your guest isn't eating. Well, in my restaurants, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
Everyone eats all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
if my restaurant undercooks, a pasta dish, there better be a salad or something on that table while I have the kitchen remake the rest of the dish. And the more that you work with me, the more that you'll understand that there are no empty plates. Like, they came here to eat.
To eat.
So we're gonna make sure that they do that,
Uh-huh.
you know?
That's
And
impressive. I like that.
we don't we fill the void. We fill the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
We make sure that that it stays within that flow. And that's why it's important for people to understand that when you go into prepay, because I think that there's still going to be a little bit of time before that actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think any good operator will make sure that that guest is going to leave happy.
Right.
I can,
And does that dish get comped? Do you comp that dish?
if it comes off, does it cut? Yeah. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd rather you sit down and have, let's say, so if we're walking through it and I'm gonna turn to my dining room team and be like, make sure he has everything,
Uh-huh.
everything, you know. And some people will take advantage of that. Some people, but
Well, that's like everything, right? I mean, there's you can tell the people who are, you know, just complaining to get free meals and free food and
yeah,
being
they
taken
stick
about
out.
take care. They stick out. Yeah,
They
you're in the
stick
industry for a while. You know who they are.
out. Yeah,
That to me, that's why this topic was so important to bring up because I know there's people that do that, and I wanted to get your take on, what's that process look like? How do you talk to and train your staff, to like, is there a red flag that came up that said, I think I have a guest who's just fishing for free food?
you
you
can
know?
tell. You so like, as an operator for this long, you can and not and a good chef, like you can tell, like if your rock star service team, if they come back and their face is all like munched up, you're like, oh man, why is he giving it to this guy? Like this guy is the nicest guy, of all the whole team. He's the nicest guy, gets along with everyone,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want any problems, just wants to come in, work in a nice environment, work in a nice place, and do good things.
Yeah.
That's what he wants. And he wants to make good money.
Right.
Let's again, I keep that on the table because it should be. But so there were a few nights where, if you know your staff, you're going to know where there's concern. And again,
Yeah.
me being the owner operator, I don't want to solve every problem. I want to make sure all the problems are solved, but I don't want to solve every problem. So I want to make sure that I go over, check in with the staff, and if they're like, "Chef, we got it. It's no big deal." The guy just
Mhm.
has hairspray in his eye or whatever it is, and then you just move on.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. And I think it goes a long way, for when you have employees who you work with and you know them and you know their style, you can tell that something's just not right with these guests, and that you can see that this could be a potential red flag for someone just wanting to bite on getting free food.
You have to. Like
Yeah,
you have to understand that the people, the service industry, the people that serve people, the people that are out there on the dining room floor, they have to deal with all of you.
yeah.
All of you. They have to deal with all of you.
Hmm.
And it's not just, you know, that's not easy to do energetically. Like everybody has a different energy, and you walk up to 100 people and they all have a different frequency, like that can be really exhausting. And
Yeah,
if you're not good at, protecting your energy, that's going to be detrimental to your career. That's why a lot of people don't work in it,
yeah,
because
yeah,
most people are not equipped to touch that many human environments that often.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So in closing, these processes and procedures that we talk about, they're very essential for providing excellent customer service and ensuring a good, positive dining experience. Give us some of your closing thoughts on what we talked about today.
Mm. I think those five, those 5 points were current and relevant. And I think
Hmm.
that, experienced diners are going to understand, or hopefully understand a little bit more,
Yeah,
about what the industry is going through right now. And I think that, me being not only a self advocate for myself, but any branch of the industry that is affiliated with it is important.
yeah,
So, to give you an example, your plumber comes in, your plumber wants to get paid. Well, what's why is it different for the restaurant?
yeah,
Somebody like so we don't have freezers full of things in my restaurants. Like we don't have frozen desserts or whatever that we're buying from someone else. Someone had stood there from 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock in the morning in order to make that. And
Right.
that's it. I'm not speaking for everyone, and I'm not going to. I'm speaking for myself
Right.
and my teams, but that's just how I do things. That's how
Hmm.
I want to do things.
Right.
And I'm always going to lean towards having things that are crafted versus bought.
Right.
So not every not every restaurant operates under that guideline.
Hmm.
Um, I don't want to say one way or another. I mean, the guests can make up their own minds when it comes to that, you
Hmm.
know. Um, but we made 100% of the food, and
Yeah.
people can attest to that. So, that's important.
Yeah.
Now, going into the final points that we're trying to make is that I want the industry to shift.
Hmm.
I'm looking for someone to shake that tree.
Yeah.
Like we learned a lot during COVID.
Hmm.
At least I did. I saw a lot of true colors come out, and it was uh, I think that the industry as a whole needs to get its act together
Yeah.
and put themselves first instead of just taking you on the chin because
And that's a good point you
we're
just mentioned too.
we're we're yeah we're in the service industry, and our job
Yeah.
is to make other people happy. That's what, at least that's what it is to me. Now, hospitality means a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, like there's not just a few ways to define hospitality.
Hmm.
And for me, my job is to make as many people happy as I can without losing myself. I cannot lose the definition of myself. I've worked too fucking hard to get to where I am, and I'm not going
Yeah.
to do that. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yep. And you had a good point
I
too, right? With these points, if we follow these basic 5 points here, you know, greeting and seating, taking orders, food preparation, customer interaction, feedback, billing and payments. If we follow those simple 5 points, we can have a pretty good experience, you know?
and that was our goal. That's our goal.
Yeah.
There should be three ring binders. There should be graphs. There should be maps. There should be scenarios. There should be a whiteboard. There should be a sales board. Like you want your people to understand what we're doing. Like you
Right.
don't want to lose sight about you know what we're actually here to do.
Right.
You know, I'm not saying the money is secondary, but I'll never say the food is secondary.
Yeah. That's huge. Right. Yeah. Food's got to be first. You want that experience. Yeah. That food and that experience.
You
Absolutely.
can't you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
Like there's an expiration date on what we sell.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that screwdriver can sit there till next year. Like our inventory doesn't work that way. You
It
know.
doesn't work that way. Right. And that's great. Scott, appreciate the conversation. I think this
Yes,
was
sir.
great. It opened my eyes up to the opposite side because I come from the customer service side. You're in the restaurant industry side. And I think seeing both sides of this, it's really I think this was good. It taught me a lot. And I hope our listeners learned a lot. And hopefully their experiences at restaurants they go to are just as good and on par as you like to treat your guests.
All right.
So
Great.
appreciate you. Great conversation. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate it. Have a
Until
great day.
next time, man, enjoy. Thanks for
Yes,
coming on.
sir.
Appreciate you. You've been listening to the Q.A.C. Team Podcast with your host, Charles Luttrell. Connect with us on the web at qacteam.com, Facebook and Instagram at qac.team. Thanks for listening.